Hi, I'm James, a web analyst specializing in analytics, ad operations, and SEO. I'm working with Wix Studio to guide you through this module of our course, all about Google Search Console, an essential resource in SEO. To start with, we'll look at how to connect to and verify a site through Google Search Console. We'll get you familiar with all the reports Google Search Console has to offer, from performance reports to crawl stats and everything in between. And finally, we'll give you the lowdown on how to connect to another useful Google tool for SEO, Google Analytics 4. By the end of this module, you'll be able to navigate Google Search Console with ease and know many ways to analyze a website. Ready to get started? Great! Let's jump in, beginning with our first lesson, an introduction to Google Search Console. If you want a website to succeed on Google, you need to understand how visitors make their way to its content. That means understanding how Google sees that content and the keywords people search on Google that lead them to the web pages. These two factors are the foundation for successful SEO, whether you're working on an enterprise-level website or a personal blog. And there's one resource you can use to learn them both: Google Search Console. In this lesson, we'll talk about what Google Search Console is and look at its main dashboard and the information it gives us. Later in the course, we'll take a deep dive into Search Console reports and the actions you can take based on their findings. Google Search Console is a completely free tool that gives you direct access to information that Google has about a site. It can tell you if there are any problems that might be holding back your client's performance in Google's organic search, and it's available to anyone who owns or manages a website and completes the verification process. Search Console is not just any reporting platform, it also allows for two-way communication with Google. You can use it to tell the search engine about a site and ask it to take particular actions, such as re-indexing a page or removing a page from search results entirely. Whether Google actually acts on those requests is a different matter. Now, I should say that Google isn't the only search engine or the only source of organic search traffic. Many other search engines have their own equivalent of Search Console. For example, Bing offers Bing Webmaster Tools, but as Google makes up over 90% of the global search engine market share, it makes sense to start with Search Console. Let's dive into the Search Console dashboard now. When you open Search Console, you'll land here on the Overview report. This gives you top-level metrics for Search Console's 4 key reporting sections: performance, indexing, experience, and enhancements. You'll see that these are the same sections that are listed in the main menu. Let's talk through them. First up, performance. This shows you the number of clicks a site has had from organic search over the past 3 months. Indexing. This shows you how many pages are included in Google's index, and just as importantly, how many are not. Experience. This shows you whether those pages offer a good user experience, as Google understands it. It also tells you whether the pages are HTTPS, which is secure, or HTTP, which isn't. And finally, enhancements. These are special features on a site that use structured data. Things like video, breadcrumbs, and search boxes can all use structured data to tell Google more about a site and its content. If you work on more than one website, you can switch between them in Search Console using the drop-down menu in the top left corner. Before you can select a website, you first have to verify it in Search Console, and that's what we'll look at in our next lesson: how to verify a site and what to do after it's verified. See you there. To use Search Console, you need to verify a site to prove that you own or manage it. This is to stop other people from accessing private data about the website or even making changes that will affect how it appears in Google search. Google gives you a number of methods to verify a site. Which one you choose will depend on your technical skills and the level of access you have to the website. You'll also need a free Google account. If you use Gmail, you probably have one of these already. In this lesson, we'll look at how to get a site verified and the steps to take right after. So let's dive in. First, go to search.google.com/Search Console, click on the blue Start Now button, then log into your Google account, or create one. You'll now see the Welcome to Google Search Console splash screen. If you are already logged into your Google account, you'll be taken straight here. On the Welcome screen, first choose the property type you want to verify, domain or URL prefix. This determines the verification methods available to you. Out of these two property types, domain is more powerful, as it will show you how Google sees your URLs across your different subdomains and protocols. By protocols, I mean HTTP or HTTPS. For example, if you verify the domain example.com, you'll be able to access Search Console data for HTTP example.com, HTTPS example.com, and any subdomains. On the other hand, URL prefix limits you to a single domain and protocol. If you verify HTTPS example.com, you won't be able to access data on URLs beginning with HTTP example.com or any subdomains. But there's nothing stopping you from verifying multiple URL prefix properties. This could even be a useful way to manage access if you have colleagues or partners who only need to work on a specific subdomain. The downside of the more powerful domain approach is that it only gives you one verification method, DNS verification. This involves adding a record to your DNS configuration. Depending on your setup, you may need to do this through your domain name provider, such as GoDaddy, or your website builder, such as Wix Studio. If you don't have access to your DNS configuration, you'll need to use the URL prefix approach instead. Here, you have a choice of verification methods, in addition to DNS. Uploading an HTML file to a website, that's Google's recommended approach. Adding a meta tag to a website's homepage. A meta tag is a small piece of information about a site, like a label. Using a Google Analytics account, or using a Google Tag Manager account. If you aren't sure how to upload an HTML file or add a meta tag, it's worth checking whether your platform, CMS, or site builder offers any tools to make this process easier. For example, Wix Studio has a site verification manager where you can paste in the meta tag and it will automatically be added to the site. Whatever verification method you choose, remember that you'll need to leave it in place even after verification. For example, if you upload a meta tag, removing that tag later on will cause you to lose access to that property in Search Console. For that reason, it's a good idea to verify your site with more than one method if you can. Once you've verified your site, it can take some time, perhaps a day or two, for data to become available in Search Console. So if you can't see anything useful straight away, you don't need to worry. And if the site itself is new, there may be no performance data at all to start with. But this will rectify itself over time as you create more content for Google to crawl and the search engine learns more about the site. Now you know how to verify a site with Google Search Console and what happens after. In the next lesson, we'll look at performance reports so you can understand how content is performing in Google Search and how to optimize it. Now that you have a site verified in Search Console, let's turn our attention to its reports. Perhaps the single most important section in Search Console is performance. This gives you the data to understand how a site's content is performing in Google Search and how you can optimize it. In this lesson, we'll dive into the performance reports section, identify key metrics, and talk about how to use search filters and export data. Let's take a look. Depending on the site, you'll either have a report called Search Results within a Performance section, or a report that's called Performance immediately below the overview. Two different names for the same report. Whatever it's called, click on this report and you'll see a table of all the search queries your website's ranking for. In other words, the keywords and phrases that users type into Google for which the site appears in the search results. This is the data for my personal site where I write marketing how-to guides. So most of the queries relate to problems that my guides solve. For example, how to see exact number of followers on Instagram. That's something I've written about. At the top of this report, you'll see 4 metrics: total clicks, total impressions, average CTR or click-through rate, and average position. And actually, you'll see these metrics throughout Search Console. Here's what they mean. Total clicks. That's the number of clicks through to a page from a Google search results page. And that's clicks on organic results, so not paid advertising. Total impressions. The number of times a page from the site has appeared in Google's organic search results. Average CTR. Your average click-through rate as a percentage. If you get 1 click from 100 impressions, your CTR would be 1%. Average position. Your average position in Google organic search results, with 1 indicating the first or top result. The lower the number, the better. By default, only total clicks and total impressions are selected, but you can click on the other 2, average CTR and average position, to add them to both the table and graph on this page. The tabs just above the table let you swap from a list of your top search queries to a list of your top pages with the same metrics, clicks, impressions, and so on. And you can even click on a page and then swap back to the Queries tab to see which queries that page is ranking for. At the very top, you have your search filters. You can change the search type here. So if you want to know how a site is performing in Google Images or Google News, this is the place to go. You can also change the time period. By default, this report only shows data from the last 3 months, but you can change this to a maximum of 16 months. And that's the case for pretty much all the reports in Search Console. The date range filter also lets you compare one time period against another, a super useful tool if your client's business is seasonal. For example, a retailer selling Christmas trees would expect relevant search phrases to have high volumes in December but low volumes in July. So they might want to compare this December against December last year. Be careful though, because Search Console only retains data for the past 16 months. This means you won't be able to compare the most recent full year against the previous one in any of Search Console's reports, as that would require at least 24 months of data. If you want to review search data systematically, you can export it to Google Sheets or download it as an Excel or zipped CSV file. Do this by clicking on the Export button to the top right of the report and selecting your preferred option. This will give you up to 1,000 rows of spreadsheet data, which you can sort and filter exactly as you wish, and potentially build into your keyword research plan or SEO report. For example, you might want to look at queries where you're getting clicks, but your average position has fallen. Perhaps the pages generating those clicks would benefit from a content update to push them back up to their previous position. There are 2 other reports in the performance section, Discover and Google News. They follow the same format as the search results report, but they focus on other sources of traffic. The Discover report shows you traffic from Google Discover, which is a personalized content feed available in the Google mobile app. The Google News report shows you traffic from news.google.com and the Google News app on Android and iOS, but not from the News tab in Google Search. You'll only see these reports in Search Console if you're getting traffic from Discover or News. If they aren't listed, it means they aren't traffic sources for your client's site. Now you know what to find in the performance reports of Google Search Console. In the next lesson, we'll go over how to use the URL inspection tool. For a web page to appear in Google's organic search results, 3 things need to happen. First, the page needs to be discovered by Google. That is, Google has to know the page exists. Then, it needs to be crawled by Google. This is where Google sends its bot to read the content. And finally, it needs to be indexed by Google. Google decides that the page is good enough and unique enough to show in search results. Let's say you have concerns or questions about one particular page on a client site. Has it been discovered, crawled, indexed? To answer that, you'll want to use Search Console's URL inspection tool. In this lesson, we'll look at how to use the URL inspection tool, get to know how Google discovers a page, and how to find out when Google last crawled one. We'll also look at how to use the Test Live URL option, which lets you see a page as Google sees it. Let's jump in. Here we are in Search Console. Paste a page's URL into the search box at the top to start the inspection process. Wait while Google retrieves the data about the page from its index. It can take a few seconds. You'll then see the status of the page. This page has been indexed. Great. But there's a lot more information available to you if you click on the page indexing section to expand it. Let's look at 2 pieces of information in particular: how Google discovered the page and when Google last crawled the page. How Google discovered a page is useful if you've spotted some URLs in Search Console that you feel shouldn't be there. Just pop one into the URL inspection tool and you'll find out whether Google discovered that page through an XML sitemap, a link on your client site, a link on an external site, or some other way. Sadly, it's not unusual for spam websites to link to non-existent pages on a site. That can cause these made-up URLs to appear in Search Console. It doesn't mean there's a problem on your client site or that you have malware. Using the URL inspection tool can put your mind at rest here. When Google last crawled the page is useful information for a different reason. Let's say you updated a page 1 week ago, but the URL inspection tool tells you that Google last crawled it 3 weeks ago. That means your most recent changes won't be reflected in Google search results, and you might be missing out on traffic as a result. What you can do in this scenario is use the button at the top of the URL inspection report to request indexing. Here you're asking Google to revisit the page and crawl it again to index the latest version. You can do this for brand new pages as well as updated ones. Bear in mind though that, as the button says, this is just a request. Making the request doesn't guarantee that Google will crawl your page anytime soon. And if it's a new page, there's no guarantee that Google will choose to add it to its index. The Test Live URL option lets you see a page as Google sees it, which is not the same as how a human sees it. Click on the button to run the test. The test can take a minute or 2. Once it's complete, click View Tested Page to view the page either as HTML or as a screenshot. This can be useful for identifying any parts of the page that Google can't or won't crawl. One question that comes up in SEO circles sometimes is whether Google can see content rendered by JavaScript. The short answer is yes, but this tool is a good way to put your mind at rest if you have any concerns. As part of the live test, you can also see if Google was unable to, or chose not to, load any page resources. Click on More Info and then Page Resources to see what Google hasn't loaded. In this example, Google hasn't loaded the analytics code or the advertising code for the site. Neither of these would be needed by Googlebot. They're not content that you would want to be indexed, so there's no problem here. Now you know how to use the URL inspection tool in Google Search Console for troubleshooting problems on individual web pages. In the next lesson, we'll look at the page indexing report, which can tell you about issues that affect groups of pages or even an entire site, and how to use it to identify and fix problems. If you saw the lesson on Google Search Console's URL inspection tool, you now have a handle on troubleshooting problems on individual web pages. But that tool won't tell you about issues that affect groups of pages or even an entire site. That's where Search Console's page indexing report comes in. In this lesson, we'll look at what the page indexing report is, some reasons why Google doesn't index pages, and when to take action. You'll find the page indexing report under Indexing Pages. The graph at the top shows the number of pages on a site that are and aren't indexed. Underneath that is a breakdown of the reasons why pages haven't been indexed, and the number of pages affected by each reason. Under the source column, you'll see that some of the reasons are marked Google Systems, and some are marked Website. Let's look at the reasons that may not need action versus reasons that may need action. If a reason is marked Google Systems, it relates to Google's behavior and may be out of your control. But if a reason is marked Website, this is a possible action for you. As Google says, you should fix the issue if it makes sense to do so. If it makes sense is a key point here. In many cases, it's fine for URLs not to be indexed. For example, this site has a lot of pages with redirect. That relates to redirects I've added or that my CMS has added for me automatically when I changed the URL. It's nothing to worry about because I don't want Google to index the old URL. I only want it to index the new one. That means I don't need to take action. I've also got discovered, currently not indexed. These are pages that Google is aware of but hasn't got round to crawling. Unless you're managing a huge site, something like a major e-commerce website with thousands of uncrawled pages, this isn't anything to worry about either. And a third reason I can see here is excluded by no index tag. The no index tag is a small tag you can add to a page to tell Google and other search engines not to index it. This isn't a technical problem, but do check to make sure you haven't accidentally no indexed a page that you do want to appear in search results. You might, for example, have added the tag when you were working on a new page and it wasn't ready for Google, but then forgot to remove it. Now let's look at 3 reasons that may require some attention or action on your part. Firstly, not found 404. This is an error indicating that the page couldn't be found on the server. If you've moved the page, you should put a redirect in place. If you haven't moved it or deleted it, there may be a technical issue with the site. The next one is duplicate without user selected canonical. That means Google sees this page as a duplicate of another page and is showing that other page rather than this one in search results. You can delete one of the duplicate pages or add a meta tag called a canonical tag to tell search engines which one is the main version. And finally, redirect error. This can happen when you have a long chain of redirects, or perhaps 2 pages that are both redirecting to each other, creating a redirect loop. To fix this, you'll need to break the loop or reduce the size of the chain. For example, you might have page A redirecting to B, B to C, and C to D. You could get rid of all of these redirects and instead redirect A, B, and C directly to D. Google has published a full list of reasons why it might not index a page on its Search Console help website. Even when the page indexing report does indicate problems, bear in mind that this report isn't in real time. It lists issues that Google found when it tried to crawl a site's content, not necessarily errors that affect the site right now. To put it another way, the report could include problems that have already been fixed by the time you come to look at it. For that reason, it's really worth digging into each issue to see whether they still need to be tackled. Click into any of the listed reasons to access a graph of the number of pages affected over the past 90 days and some examples of the affected pages. You might immediately spot a pattern. Perhaps those 404s all relate to blog posts or to tag pages. Here, for example, all the pages that are crawled currently not indexed on my site are feed pages for specific categories. I don't want those pages indexed anyway, as they don't have unique content. Once you know which section of the site is affected and when the problem started, or at least when Search Console detected it, it will be much easier to see whether it's still an issue, identify the cause, and, should you need to, fix it. If you're sure an issue has been resolved, the next step is to ask Google to validate fix by clicking the button at the top. It will then schedule a recrawl. But it's worth repeating that not every reason listed in this report is a problem, and not everything will need to be fixed. Now you know how to use the Pages report within the indexing section of Google Search Console. In the next lesson, we'll turn to another report in this section, the Sitemaps report. In the previous lesson, we looked at the Pages report within the indexing section of Google Search Console. Now let's turn to another report in this section, the Sitemaps report. Actually, this is both a report and a tool, because it lets you submit an XML sitemap and then monitor its status. An XML sitemap is a document that lists a website's pages, or at least the ones you want search engines to crawl and hopefully index. Without a sitemap, search engines will still try to find a site's pages by following internal and external links, that is, links on the site and on other sites. But a sitemap can help them with that discovery process. It can also help them to understand when existing pages have been updated and might need to be recrawled. XML sitemaps shouldn't be confused with HTML sitemaps, which are web pages that list the categories and topics covered on a site. These are mainly intended to help human users of a site rather than search engines. So, how do you get an XML sitemap? It's likely that your website platform or builder will be able to generate one for you, either as part of its core functionality or through a plugin or extension. Being an XML file, the address should end in .xml. Once you have that address, enter it into Search Console's Sitemap tool and click Submit. You can submit more than one sitemap if, for example, you're using domain verification in Search Console and each subdomain has its own sitemap. Alternatively, your platform might give you a sitemap index. This is an XML file listing lots of different sitemaps, perhaps one for posts, one for category pages, one for tag pages, and so on. You can submit your sitemap index in the same way as a regular sitemap. This enables Google to find and read all of the sitemaps listed in your index. So that's how to submit your sitemaps. But what can Google Search Console then tell you about your sitemaps? The report lists all of your submitted sitemaps and sitemap indexes, when Google last read each sitemap, the number of pages Google discovered, and whether Google encountered any problems with the sitemap. If there are no problems with your sitemap, Search Console will show the word success in green under the status column. But it could show you one of two red status messages instead. Couldn't fetch or has errors. Couldn't fetch means that Google wasn't able to retrieve your sitemap at all. Perhaps you entered the wrong URL, for example. Has errors means that Google fetched your sitemap, but either couldn't read it all or couldn't crawl all of the URLs. Perhaps your sitemap is empty, or perhaps the formatting is wrong. If you see either of these red status messages, click on your sitemap to get more information about the specific problem. Once you've fixed the problem, resubmit the sitemap to Google Search Console. You can also click into a sitemap index to see the same information for all the sitemaps that it contains. If you find that Google is not discovering a lot of your URLs, you should first check that your sitemap has been submitted to Google Search Console. You should then check that there are no errors or issues with your sitemap. You can do both of these in the Sitemaps report. Now you know how to use the Sitemaps report in Google Search Console. In the next lesson, we'll turn to the Experience reports. See you there. In this lesson, we're looking at Google Search Console's Experience reports. These reports provide a summary of a site's user experience as Google understands it. This isn't just about user experience though, it's also key to good SEO. In other words, providing a bad experience could hurt a site's rankings, its traffic, and ultimately its conversions. We'll now dive into the first experience report, page experience. This is an overview that shows what proportion of your URLs are good, that is, offer a good user experience based on two things, core web vitals and HTTPS. And there are separate, more detailed reports for both of those areas. If a page passes core web vitals and is served using HTTPS rather than HTTP, Google considers it good. But what are core web vitals? They're a set of factors that Google believes are particularly important to user experience. They measure real-world user experience based on three factors: loading performance, interactivity, and visual stability. Loading performance is measured with a metric called largest contentful paint, or LCP. Simply put, this is how long it takes for the page's main content to load. Interactivity is measured with interaction to next paint, or INP. This is a new metric introduced in March 2024. INP is the time between the user interacting with a page, clicking a button for example, and the page updating visually. Visual stability is the most interesting one. Have you ever been on a web page and you go to click when suddenly something loads on the page, then the whole page shifts around and you end up clicking on the wrong thing, usually an ad? That's what Google means by visual stability, and it's measured with a metric called cumulative layout shift, or CLS. The less shift, the better. The Core Web Vitals report in Search Console shows the number of URLs or pages on a site that are good, need improvement, or are poor according to these three metrics. Are some of your URLs failing to hit the good rating? Click on the Open Report link alongside either the mobile or desktop section to see the reasons why. For example, this site has an issue with LCP, loading performance, on every page on mobile. That suggests the problem isn't with individual pieces of content, but with how the site as a whole loads. It may be worth looking at the page templates or considering caching to improve site performance. The final report within the Experience section is HTTPS. This shows you how many of your index URLs are HTTPS and how many are just HTTP. The HTTPS protocol is better both for user security and for a site's SEO. Google has confirmed it is a ranking factor. So if you have HTTP pages showing up here, it's definitely worth diving into this report to find out why. It could be something as simple as an invalid certificate, or perhaps you're missing redirects from HTTP to HTTPS. Now you know how to use the experience reports in Google Search Console. In the next lesson, we'll cover the enhancements reporting section. In this lesson, we're looking at the last of the four main reporting sections in Search Console, enhancements. By enhancements, we mean features on a site that use structured data. So that could be breadcrumbs, videos, search boxes, a forum, and lots more besides. Let's dive in. What is structured data? It's a standardized format for providing information about a page and the page content. For example, structured data for a video could contain information about the video's upload date, expiry date, duration, and contents through a description or even a transcript. That's all information that Google wouldn't otherwise be able to get by crawling a page with an embedded video on it. So you can see how structured data can help Google and other search engines understand a page in much greater detail. This in turn can make a site eligible to be shown in enhanced search results, also known as rich results. Structured data may sound technical, but there's good news. Your platform or site builder, or even well-written third-party plugins, may add it to your clients' pages automatically. Wix Studio, for example, implements structured data markup on blog posts, product pages, forum posts, and event pages by default. Search Console's enhancements reports are the place to see whether your pages contain any features with structured data. You'll have access to a different report for each enhancement that Google has detected on your site. On the other hand, if there aren't any enhancements, you won't see this section in Search Console at all. This site has breadcrumbs, site links search box, and videos with structured data. Let's click into videos. In the individual enhancement report, Search Console will also flag up any errors it has found in your structured data implementation. These could be critical issues in red, which is when your structured data is not valid, or they could be improvements in yellow, which is when your structured data is valid but could benefit from extra information to make it even more informative. For example, this site has one potential improvement to make. I could add a time zone to the upload date property. If your structured data does need a fix, this may be something you can tackle yourself, or it may be something you need to raise with a plugin or theme developer via a support request, for example. When the fix is done, click into the item in Search Console and click on the Validate Fix button. This will prompt Search Console to check again. Now you know how to use the Enhancements section in Google Search Console. See you in the next lesson, where we'll turn to the Links report. We've looked at the four main reporting sections in Search Console: performance, indexing, experience, and enhancements. There are a few reports in Search Console that fall outside these sections, but that doesn't mean they're not useful. In this lesson, we focus on one of those extra reports, the Links report. The Links report isn't mentioned in the Search Console overview, but you can find it in the main menu, just above Settings. So links, as you probably know, are hugely important to Google and to other search engines. Not only does Google follow links to discover new content, it also sees them as an important ranking factor. Links pointing to a page can tell Google that the page is valuable. Of course, links from some sites carry a lot more value than links from others. Here in the Links report in Search Console, you can learn about the links to a site that Google is aware of. There are four sections. External links. Your pages with the most links from other sites. You might know these links as backlinks or inbound links. Internal links. Your pages with the most links from other pages on a site. If a page doesn't have any internal links, it won't be listed here, even if it's indexed by Google. This sort of page is called an orphan page, and they can be hard for users and search engines to find. Top linking sites. The sites that are linking to you the most. You might be able to find some potential partners, contributors, advertisers or customers, depending on the business model, by looking through this list. Top linking text. The most commonly used anchor text in backlinks to a site. By that I mean the specific words that are turned into a link. For each of these sections, click on More to see a full list of pages, link metrics, export options, and search filters, or click on a page to see the individual links into that page. It's no surprise that my home page, my about page, and so on have the most internal links. After all, they're linked to in my main menu, which appears on every page. My category and tag pages appear quite high up the list too. It's good to link posts to structural pages like these, both to help users to navigate a site and search engines to understand it. So this Search Console report does have its limitations. It doesn't show historic data or changes over time. You can't tell whether you're gaining new links or when Google first detected a link. And remember, links aren't all equally valuable. A link from an authoritative site, such as bbc.co.uk, will help you much more from an SEO standpoint than one from a smaller or less trustworthy site. But Search Console won't give you any insight into how it values various external links. To do that, you'll need to use a different tool that estimates how authoritative different sites are. Link Explorer from Moz is a good example of a tool that does this. Now you know how to use the links report in Google Search Console and what kinds of links to pay attention to. In the next lesson, we'll dig into the crawl stats report. In this course, we've talked about how Google first discovers a page, then crawls it, and then hopefully indexes it. But Google will only allocate a certain amount of resources to crawling a site. That means Googlebot, that's Google's crawler, will only crawl so many pages of a site in any given period of time. That's called your crawl budget. If your client's site is small, then this isn't really a concern. But if your client's site is large, it's then something you may have to think about and even optimize. By larger site, I mean tens of thousands of pages, especially if they're updated regularly. For sites like these, a crawl budget is important because it affects how quickly Google will pick up any changes made to a site, and that affects how quickly SEO improvements will generate results. To understand how a crawl budget is being spent, you'll want Search Console's Crawl Stats report. Let's take a look. Because it's aimed at advanced users, the Crawl Stats report is one of the most hidden reports in Search Console. It isn't listed in the main menu. You'll find it under Settings. Scroll down to the Crawling section and click Open Report. This report shows Google's crawling history on a website over the past 90 days, the number of crawl requests it's made, the average response time from its server, the server responses it's received, and so on. For now, let's focus on the server responses. This can help you understand if there's an issue with crawl health. For this site, Googlebot is spending most of its time crawling pages that do exist. That's the OK 200 server response. It's what we want to see. But if all your crawl budget was being spent on Google crawling pages that are not found, that's the 404 server response, then that might be a problem. By the way, you can click on any of these responses to see some example pages if you want to investigate further. Average response time is also important. This is the time it takes for a crawl request to retrieve the content from the site. You can add this metric to the graph at the top of the report by clicking on it. The lower the response time, the more quickly Google can crawl a site, and the more pages it can crawl with the resources allocated to you. So a fast site can help you make the most of your crawl budget. But there's an even better way to increase your crawl budget, and that's to increase the user value and uniqueness of the content on a site. Create a site that people want to visit, and Google will want to crawl it. Now you know how to use the Crawl Stats report. And with that, we've now gone through almost all the reports in Google Search Console. In the last lesson, we'll go over how to connect Search Console with Google Analytics 4. In this final lesson, we're going to look at connecting Search Console with another free Google tool, Google Analytics 4, or GA4. This unlocks new reports in GA4 and lets you see Search Console metrics, such as search impressions, right alongside GA4 metrics, like conversions. But first, what's the difference between Search Console and GA4? They both give you insight into a site's performance and help you make website and business decisions. But the data they provide is quite different. Put simply, Search Console, as we've covered in this course, is an SEO tool that tells you how Google sees a site. It's focused on organic search performance. On the other hand, GA4 is an analytics platform that tells you what people do on a site. It's focused on user activity. Bringing the two together can be extremely powerful. So let's dive in. So I've already verified my site in Search Console and set up my Google Analytics 4 property. Here I am in GA4. To link it with Search Console, I do the following. Go to Admin. Under Product Links, click Search Console Links. Click Links. choose from my list of verified Search Console properties. Click Confirm, click Next, select the web data stream from my site, click Next. Finally, click Submit. Once I've done that, I can enable or publish to special Search Console reports in GA4. Click on Reports in the GA4 menu. Click on Library. In the Collections section, find the collection called Search Console. Click on the menu icon, the 3 dots, for this collection. Select Publish. After a few seconds, a new section called Search Console will appear in your GA4 Reports menu. If you expand this, you'll see your 2 new reports, Queries and Google Organic Search Traffic. The good news is that these reports will show data straight away, going back to when you verified the site in Search Console or created your GA4 web data stream, whichever happened more recently. Here's what the 2 new reports give you. Queries. This shows your organic search queries along with number of clicks, impressions, CTR, and average search position, the 4 key metrics we saw in Search Console's performance reports. The report lets you wrangle the data in slightly different ways than Search Console. For example, you can produce a graph of organic search clicks over time, broken down by device category, desktop, mobile, or tablet, whereas Search Console will just give you the headline figures for that as a table. Google Organic Search Traffic. This report shows your landing pages along with key Search Console metrics and some GA4 metrics like average engagement time, event count, and number of conversions. Having this data side by side is really insightful. After all, what's the benefit of a particular page performing well in search if it isn't generating any engagement or conversions? Now you know how to connect Google Search Console to Google Analytics 4 and the new reports that connection gives you. Stay tuned for a recap on what we learned throughout our Search Console lessons. So here we are, having covered a lot of ground. I'm delighted that you're now ready to use Google Search Console to your advantage. Throughout the course, we went through everything from how to connect to and verify a site through Google Search Console, getting familiar with all the useful reports it offers, all the way to connecting to Google Analytics 4, which we also have a course on here in Wix Studio Academy. Now you can analyze a website in so many ways and make sure it's performing as well as it possibly can. Thanks for following along.